I'm delighted tonight to welcome on the Chronic Pain Club talk show. Just an absolute pillar of the rheumatology space, at least from my perspective anyway, in the UK. Professor Yeliz Prior, welcome in. I hope you're good.
Thank you, Joe. That's a very warm welcome. I'm really glad to be here. I've been listening to your podcast for a long time. Your podcast is a pillar of our rheumatology society in the UK. Yeah, so I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. And I should say Happy Mother's Day as well. So it's Mother's Day here in the UK. So thank you so much for joining us on Mother's Day. I feel slightly guilty, but I'm also very grateful you've given up your time for us.
Not at all. I've had a very nice meal with my son, and my daughter is in Plymouth at the university, so I couldn't see her today, but yeah, I'm very happy to be here. He's listening downstairs.
Oh, brilliant. I'm glad you had a great day. For anyone, like I feel like I know you pretty well, and we were fortunate enough to meet very briefly last year as well at ULAR. But for anyone that hasn't come across who you are and what you do, I appreciate you wear quite a number of hats. Do you want to maybe just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do?
Of course, yes. So my background, I'm first and foremost a rheumatology occupational therapist. I worked many years in the NHS, but at the moment I'm full-time academic. I'm a professor of clinical rehabilitation at the University of Salford. As part of that role, I'm also the research environment lead for the school. I'm a program lead for prosthetics and orthotics doctoral school at the university. As you said, wear many hats, but it's all mostly about rheumatology and living with long-term conditions. And I guess I'm also a person living with long-term conditions, so I feel like I look from that lenses a lot about the lived experience of things like chronic pain.
Yeah. And that'll explain why we cross paths so many times, because of all the various involvements you've had. And it's just brilliant. Yeah. So like I say, from my perspective, I look forward to we'll dip into a few of those tonight. From my perspective, thank you for everything you do. And I think it's also worth me saying at this point, thank you for being sort of one of the, I don't think it's a minority anymore, but it did feel like at the time in terms of like wanting to listen to that patient experience and people like me, you know, and what we're trying to raise awareness of, because that really comes across that you're sort of like, you're listening to that side of things. And just on behalf of the community, a big thank you for that. And I'm sure it's one of the reasons why you're so very much popular on the likes of Twitter and everything else.
Oh, thank you. I mean, to be honest, I feel I'm part of that community. So I feel more of a person living with a long-term condition than an academic most of the time. So because my main job is research, I see the benefits of working with patient research partners so much. They are the ones who brings really the original ideas, the innovative things, the best research questions. So if there are still academics out there not valuing that, then they will be at the losing end. Mostly I think everybody is on board. But there are still a long way to go for acknowledging that input and have a proper co-design for studies. I think we are on the right path to that destination which seemed quite a long way away, like let's say 10 years ago.
Yeah, you really is coming across like how well we've had people on here who have talked about, you know, person-centered approaches and co-production and this sort of thing, which when we started this show, absolutely, we just wouldn't, it would just be patients talking to patients. So I'm really grateful for the likes of yourselves and those sort of like, I want to say early adopters, there's got to be a better word for it, but you know what I mean? Those people that are already in tune to that, because even in the sort of 5 years I've been doing all of this, you've really felt the change, and it genuinely gives patients like myself, and I'm sure yourself as well, like hope, you know, the hope that there is a change coming, and that patient voice is going to be very much part of it and shared decision making, etc., going forward. So thank you again for being a big part of that and giving us that.
Thank you, Joel, because I think that change is mostly to do with people like you. So you were saying quite rightly, you know, you're doing this podcast and it looks all nice, colors, you know, it smiles, and we're all having good fun. But I mean, and I can't see that skin problems you mentioned on it, because your skin looks perfect. But I think it's that this always puts a bit of a filter, doesn't it? Is on the online, but it's what you're doing is the most difficult thing, and voicing out difficult conversations, and that is what making the difference, rather than us academic trying to, I think, talk about it to each other.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that definitely fuels me for another couple of months. I appreciate it.
Good, good.
I don't take compliments very well, but I'm getting better. I'm trying to get better. So, in terms of like your lived experience, do you want to tell us a little bit about what condition? Because I believe you've got a couple of autoimmune conditions. What ones you live with, and how that sort of started and presented, and feel free to go as deep with this as you like, because our audience very much interested in this side of things.
Yes, I lived with the pain, especially chronic pain, all my life. I can't remember because I was age 7. I remember going on this summer holiday, which is probably the single holiday I had in my childhood, because I haven't had a very privileged childhood either. And after the holiday, I come up in lots of rashes and really, sore throat and painful joints. And it took a while to diagnose, but I was bedridden and missed almost a year in school, that I was diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis, JIA. At the time, they were looking at also things like, first they thought it was rheumatic fever, but I had, I'm quite not sure how it led to it, because the medical kind of records is not as good in Turkey. I should mention I'm originally from Turkey, Istanbul, Turkey, and I came to the UK 24 years ago, age 22. I'll let you do the maths as how old I am. So I was diagnosed with JIA, and I had a very painful sort of few years following that, and access to treatment wasn't great either. So I was treated with penicillin injections monthly, which led to then antibiotic resistance as well, quite a bit, and kind of ruined my tooth. They wouldn't do those that things now as a treatment of JIA at all. Then I kind of had a remission in my late teens to early 20s, but I've always had back pain. So I think because I've had a pain, but it was manageable, so I wasn't having the flares and sort of, it wasn't impossible to cope. I always had low levels of pain. And when I became mother for the first time at the age of 24, and I had a very big baby, my son was like about 10 pounds, and I was quite a small frame. I'm 5'3.5", quite petite. So my back pain was horrendous, and at the time I kept going backwards and forwards to the GP. I was kind of fobbed off because I had my son, and then 15 months later I had my daughter, so they were very close to each other. And so a lot of my symptoms was saying that, oh, you had 2 babies, they were quite big babies, was sitting on your back, and, it was in the posterior position. And then it was, oh, you're studying, you're working, you're sitting on the laptop, it's like that's why you have back pain, you need to exercise more. It wasn't until actually after several, and this is called, you have to consider, put in the context, I was working in the NHS as a rheumatology occupational therapist, and I knew all my symptoms were symptoms of axial spondyloarthritis, and I had a family history of axSpA in my dad's side. Yeah. So I'm quite textbook. So I was going to the rheumatologist saying, look, I probably, no, you don't have axSpA, you probably have fibromyalgia. At the time, actually, I was doing at the hospital fibromyalgia education classes. So I knew as well about fibromyalgia, but even then I couldn't advocate for myself enough to convince the rheumatologist, because they said I didn't have radiographic changes, but they were just looking at the MRIs. And then I had a very scary episode of septic arthritis.
Oh, wow.
I was hospitalized. Suspected it wasn't. They thought it was because of the rushes and how it came about and how poorly I was. And then my husband, who is also a rheumatology researcher, who works in the area of axial SpA, who published papers with like diagnostic delays. He said, "Okay, this enough is enough. You're going to see so and so, who is really good in this area, a rheumatologist." So me being me, I'm quite a socialist. I never wanted to use sort of like, I've gone through the NHS. I didn't want to use people I know to go and seek diagnosis.
Yeah.
Because it didn't feel right. But actually, everybody can have a second opinion. And I actually referred many patients for a second opinion to this person after I got. So when I went to see him, I'm sure people are going to ask me, who is this person? It was like a completely different experience. I had an hour consultation. Within that consultation, I had bloods done, I had X-rays done, and I actually had a proper sort of like a childhood history going through. He measured my back, my extension, my flexion, and he said to me after he got my images, he said, "Look, you can see here, the spikes in your spine and your sacroiliac joints, which is telltale signs of IS. I don't know how you haven't been diagnosed. You're already so advanced that you satisfy biologics criteria, which is a higher criteria for so that was about 5 years ago. I got finally diagnosed and started right medication, and that made a huge difference in my life, like giving me my life back, really. In terms of dealing with pain.
Period of time, and you're basically a flashing neon sign for sort of AS or axSpA, and especially with the family history, and I suppose that must have been equally like as frustrating in that you could not get probably a more informed patient. What with your occupation and your partner's occupation, and so that must have had an impact, sort of like mental health side of things, or in terms of like where you were stuck in limbo trying to get answers.
Of course, because you are stressed, you feel underestimated, and you are kind of being treated as well. Well, you're just because you know so much about it, you are giving yourself this diagnosis. So it's almost like they trust you less because you know more. That was my experience, and I heard that from other people. I think doctors, they say themselves they make the worst patients as well, because I would go with like all the questions I want to ask, and I would say, well, there's no research evidence for that. What you are saying is not. So I would really challenge them, and they didn't like that either. I thought which is what I teach my patients to do. Yes, I was stressed and frustrated.
Yeah, that must be hard, as somebody that went very much from like burying my head in the sand of my condition for many years and not really understanding it to then what I would now consider being an informed patient. That they are difficult conversations. In some ways, I found that harder than just being like the nodding dog of like saying yes to everything. And that it's hard, isn't it, to challenge and say, well, what about if? Or
it's scary as well, because what they did, they throw me really strong opioids, which when you're desperate with pain,
yes.
I had 2 young children at the time. I was studying for a PhD. I was working full time. I needed to be able to function. So I was on tramadol. I mean, I don't know. Is it okay to talk about medication?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. We're not affiliated, and people know that there's trigger warnings for all this. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah. So they've, which is a very highly addictive opioid drug, synthetic opioid, and and I knew it. I knew what it was as a health professional, but it was so easy to keep taking, and you can take up to 8. It says things that I was taking, and I ended up going. I was heavily involved with things like BSR, British Society of Rheumatology, ULAR. There's a lot of conferences. And I find them really stressful. I think people don't realize when they look at me, because I'm quite chatty, but I'm actually autistic, and I find crowded environments and conferences and things like that really stressful.
Yeah.
And when I'm stressed, my pain levels would go up to roof. So I'll be taking them like sweets to cope with it.
Yeah.
And and first, when I started to take them, they really suppressed my appetite as well. So I was losing weight. I was like, "Oh, I like this." So I'll just, even though I knew the difference, I put all that back. Weight, by the way, it's all just the initial
No,
thing.
but thank you for mentioning that, because it's sort of a side of things that the people don't talk about, isn't it? So yeah, thank you
no.
for being
Yes,
so candid.
yes, I think it's important. But also, I couldn't sleep. It caused me insomnia, basically, which I interpreted at the time is great because then I can work 20 hours a day instead of 18. But no, my health really suffered. But the worst thing happened is I had a seizure one day, and it's not in my history, so I've never had I had a proper epileptic seizure, and it was my son, who was 14 at the time, had the witness and called 999, which was very scary for him as well.
Yeah.
And I've completely lost my memory, and that was actually caused by the tramadol.
That was really wow. Again, another
Because
thing
I
that
was
isn't
taking
really
so much.
talked about, and I can totally relate. I know no one's here to hear about me, but like that, somebody, when I had my son, I had the worst flare, and I now look back and I think, well, stress and lack of sleep probably played as big a part in that as a flare, and changes to medication and stuff. But that was what I was advised, to just keep taking your painkillers, and I suddenly found myself on opioids and amitriptyline and antihistamines to help me sleep at night, and all of a sudden I couldn't hear him wake, and it was terrifying, and I needed almost like that shock. Like, obviously yours was very physical and everything, mine was, there was a particular moment where something happened and I just felt completely inferior and unsafe as a dad, and to shock me out of it. But then people don't talk about it, we move on. And so I can really relate to that. But I think it's great. It's not great, obviously, your personal experience, but it's great to hear somebody else talking openly about that.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that a lot of health professionals, because I have a lot of friends that are health professionals, ranging from doctors to allied health professionals to nurses. And the idea is that we know what to do, the right thing. We always do. We don't, because we are human as well. Yeah. And when you're coping with severe pain daily, and you have to live and bring bacon home and function, it's easy to pop in the pills, isn't it? And whereas if I was actually on the right treatment, I wouldn't have to, because the going on to the right treatment helped me so much that so I don't have to turn to opioids. And it's sad, really. There's such delay in getting diagnosis.
And we get so many people either on this show or in our peer support communities and various things that we run, that for them that is the solution, because that's all they know. And I find that heartbreaking, that we'll know that should be a temporary thing, or during a flare, or in between the proper treatments. And there are so many people that are left in that limbo, particularly since the pandemic. We see it even more now. It's really upsetting. And so I suppose I'm guessing that biologics made a big difference. And if they did, do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about that experience?
I mean, to be honest, biologic made a big difference, but I was a bit scared of going to biologics, knowing what I knew. And I thought, well, you know what, I want to start with NSAIDs, the strong NSAID, because at the time I tried sort of other NSAIDs, but not the ones like things like etodolac. And so I started with them, and for a year they did a huge difference. But then kind of I had to go on biologics because it wasn't being strong enough. And as soon as I started biologics, I think within 2 weeks I felt different. And I remember my rheumatologist saying, well, that can't work that quickly, because it can take, they say, 3 to 6 weeks and things. But I felt a difference, and that kind of remained constantly. But I did have to change a couple of biologics, because I reacted also. I come up with sort of rushes, and you have to. Yeah. It takes a while to find the right one for you.
Yeah.
And thankfully, the last one I am on, I have been on it for nearly 3 years now, and I'm doing quite well. Yeah.
Amazing. And I must admit, I thought I had some sort of crisis, thinking I just imagined my JIA for most of my life, because I went on biologics, and I'm not even joking, within a week and a half, I was virtually pain-free, and within 4 weeks, all my rashes had gone from my psoriasis. And I thought, is this like, have I just been imagining? Because it felt fairy tale stuff. And I think because of my age and generation, everything, I was the kid who would be told there's this stuff on the horizon that's going to help, but they didn't exist when we were, when I was a teenager, on things like sofsalzine and methotrexate and that. So to suddenly have this thing available that worked, and worked so unbelievably quickly and obviously, I was very emotional for several months after that, and I imagine it probably had a similar effect for you, didn't it? To know that there's this other way of living.
Being pain-free is really interesting because it just feels unnatural for someone who is on, but you just first, I remember one morning when I wake up and I felt like there was something wrong, but I couldn't put my finger what was wrong. And I didn't have stiffness. I actually could just get out to bed, like, because every morning I would wake up in an agony. Mornings were awful. I mean, my stiffness would get better after half an hour, kind of more, had the hot shower and stuff. But yeah, it's just that, and I used to have so much chest pain as well. As a woman, when you have to wear a bra, I hated wearing bra so much. Like, I was looking at, as soon as I come home or things, I would take, because it felt like constantly like a belt around my chest. And I kind of blamed having breasts. I used to think, just if only I could get rid of my breast. It's nothing to do with your breast, and I should know that. So as soon as I actually started the right medication and things, that's completely gone as well. I don't have. Yeah. I mean, it could go in AS. The chest pains can get so bad that you could feel like you're having a heart attack sometimes, or anxiety, panic attacks, and. I did experience anxiety quite a bit at the time as well, which I don't know, could be to do with the chest pains or the chronic pain, could be to do with the stress that you having to deal with everything. But I've always been quite good at dealing with anxiety, stress, and low mood, because I guess I've been trained as a therapist to do that. So I have the right tools. But sometimes that can work against you as well, because you don't recognize it, because you're coping, you keep pushing and pushing and pushing yourself. Whereas actually sometimes there's a reason your body says, stop, and just stop now. You can take on too much.
I always find it's amazing as well how permanent pain or chronic pain or severe pain can just impact your thinking. Like when you're having those thoughts, like some of my craziest ideas of when I've been at that absolute limit with my pain, and I too was diagnosed. I had diagnosed with anxiety in my 20s, and that was during a really bad flare. And I'm not an anxious person. It's literally just when I'm flaring and I'm in that amount of pain, and it makes me panic and irrational, and it's hard to describe, isn't it? But it's just wearing, and it's a symptom that maybe we're asked always, where's it hurt and how much and this sort of thing, but that wider impact of pain is not probably talked about enough, and probably why I bang on about it so much. But it sounds like you had a similar experience with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult, because as a researcher, and I'm a mixed methods researcher, so I do both quantitative, where we put numbers on things, and qualitative research. And I know that, the most painful, pain scales, like from 1 to 10, where your pain is today. And it's a lot of times it's really difficult to articulate that, isn't it? I mean, if you are pain-free, it's easy. But sometimes you can have a low-level pain, which is like around 5, but can last a long time. And that kind of wears you down as well, because you can't, it's a bit like having a little bit of toothache that is irritating. I try to explain to people, if people don't deal with chronic pain, it's very difficult for them to understand the impact of that, because they just try to understand it, from what they've experienced. That's how you develop empathy, isn't it? Being able to put yourself in other person's shoes. And if you don't suffer with chronic pain, it's not like any other pain. So it's not about how severe it is. Also, I think it's, as you said, how long it goes, how it's affecting your sleep. And I've never been a good sleeper, so sleep has always been an issue for me. Yeah.
That word resilience, and I apologise to long-term watchers or listeners to this, because I seem to bring it up every other week, but it is, so I can say my pain is an 8 out of 10 today, and then tomorrow I've got a couple of bills that are due, or I didn't get any sleep, or, maybe that flare in my knee has turned into a flare into my knee and my ankle, and suddenly I'm rating that pain a lot higher, because my ability to cope with it has changed, not necessarily the pain itself. And yeah, I'm a big champion of like moving towards a way where we can sort of measure what's going on with the wider person and their support network and that resilience side of it.
But we don't even know, in terms of scientific point of view, whether your pain is changing because of stress and other factors, as you say, or not just your perception of it, because pain is so multifactorial. I mean, I was actually talking to someone who was arguing the pain is physical because you can feel physically. But I was just saying it's not really, because you can't really measure it objectively with a physical measure, can you? So, but it's not necessarily psychological either. You feel it, but there's a lot of things we feel. You can talk about love, that you can feel love, isn't it? When you and I are both dog lovers, aren't we? So to me, for example, when I'm like playing with my dogs and hugging and cuddling them, I think they have real pain relief qualities. And things like that. So we don't really understand the mechanisms of pain and how does it work and how does it get severe, or we're a long way away from that in science.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing all that. They're all really important points, and they're all ones I know that will very much chime with our audience, because they're sort of themes that come up on the show regularly. And one of those themes is the amount of particularly females we get come on the show that are diagnosed with something like fibromyalgia, and then find out years later that it's something else. And I heard you mention that word earlier. So if we could sort of spend a bit of time talking about, where you think maybe gender played a role in that, and how maybe in your work, how you've seen sort of diagnostic delays because of that.
Yeah, well, being a woman is a gift that keeps giving sometimes. You start in your teenage years with periods. For me, it was actually age 9. So I didn't really have even got into my teenage years.
Yeah, that feels unfair.
I know, right? So I just was off of my. So, and then they said, "Oh, you know what? It will get better, your period pains, when you have kids." So I had kids at 24, 25. It didn't get any better. And then it was just like, "Oh, well, it'll get better when you have menopause." I'm perimenopausal now, and it's just things doesn't get better. There's always something going on in your body. And I'm sure being a man is not that easy, but I can only speak from a woman point of view at this point. But in terms of health experience, women, I know from research, we tend to seek health, advice more. So we tend to actually go to doctors and things. And perhaps because of those reasons as well, there's a bit more systemic bias going around in healthcare towards women, especially if you're constantly going about something like chronic pain, just like becomes a revolving door. And I know my patients told me, I felt like a hypochondriac because I'm always going with the same thing or different things, because other things gets wrong as well, isn't it? When you have chronic pain or joint pain, it can affect your bowels. It can start, you've got headaches as well. Then it's just something else goes wrong all the time. But actually, in terms of diagnostic delay in axial spondyloarthritis, is a bit more complex. So for many, many years, it was seen as a male disease because the prevalence was something like, it starts 1 to 10, being 1 being woman, 10 being man. In the recent years, then gone down to 2 to 3 to 1. But now we know and understand more about the symptoms and how it can actually be insidious and start. And also the technology is developed more, like MRIs and things. It's actually 50-50, so it is just as common in women as it is in men. In terms of diagnostic delay, again, the studies for research-wise shown that there was a more significant delay in women than men, kind of all over the, other not just in the UK. But there was a latest systematic review in 2022, which was done by Charles Hay and my husband as well, and which he kindly reminded me that they didn't find, when they looked at 13, 14 countries, they didn't find any difference by sex in terms of diagnostic delay. It's complicated because how it is measured. So how do you measure diagnostic delay? So some people say that my back pain started in early 20s, right? So but I wasn't diagnosed till, 45. So how do I then, is my diagnostic delay 25 years? Or do I just count it then going back to the first time I thought, I think this is AS and 8 years. So I go on and ask. and also how it's measured is complicated, as well as how the data is presented, without making it too complicated. So, for example, we knew for many years about, in the UK, was about 8 years. And that was based on the mean data, which is, you take all the studies and divide it by the number of studies and you get. But the data is quite skewed. So it's one side, because diagnostic the delay kind of changes from, 2 years to 10 years. So then you have to look at the mean, which is the sort of most commonly, presented in that, if you look at the data this way skewed. And that's more about sort of 2 to 6 years. But that's still not acceptable, is it? It's still unacceptable, still a long delay. And this is why, for example, I have damage on my both sacroiliac joints and the spine, which you cannot regenerate. So that's done. And I have to be on these very expensive biologics probably for the rest of my life, which if I was diagnosed earlier, wouldn't have been. And so it will save money, both the NHS, countless consultations, my quality of life. Yeah. So, and in terms of women, your other question, we know that more women is diagnosed with fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
But we don't quite know, is that because more women have fibromyalgia, or there's a more, again, sort of a sex bias in diagnosing women with fibromyalgia? So I think we are a bit premature, the studies. We need to do a lot more studies to understand the sex bias in diagnosis related to pain and chronic pain.
Yeah, like you say, it's a really complicated subject, and you have also got that element of men traditionally, but particularly in the UK, not being great at coming forward when they have problems, especially with pain. So, and that skews everything. But thank you for explaining that so beautifully and clearly. One thing I want to ask you is, like, on your experience. Obviously, you live with axSpA, and I know we haven't talked about it, but osteoarthritis as well, and plus you've mentioned being on the autistic spectrum. In any of your personal experiences, did you feel like gender played a part? Like, is that something that was you could perceive as the patient? And if so, would you mind sharing a little bit about those?
Yeah, I think in terms of my personal experience, I would say absolutely, because a lot of my pain, my back pain, was attributed to giving birth and having carried heavy babies, even because you get in axial spondyloarthritis a lot of pelvis pain and sacroiliac joints is, and the low back pain. So, and I know that actually there are studies, because I've been to APPG, which is all parties parliamentary group for axSpA meeting. When I was the vice president of British Society of Rheumatology, I was quite privileged to chair actually that APPG in the parliament, and there was a study done on women, saying that how the qualitative study showing women's perspectives on sharing back pain is because the main symptoms of axial spondyloarthritis is back pain, and mechanical back pain is so common.
Yeah.
Is the most, one of the two most common consultations in the UK, the mental health and back pain, and therefore a lot of people do get missed out. So yes, I feel really strongly about this, and because of this, actually, currently we have a study funded after many years of preparatory research by NHR program grants, which is going to last 6 years, to look into this diagnostic, improving the diagnostic delay in axial spondyloarthritis by looking at how primary care physicians like GPs and or other primary care practitioners like advanced physiotherapists, etc., picks up non-inflammatory back pain, and how is that different to inflammatory back pain. So that's a quite difficult differentiation. But actually, it's very easy to, if you have blood tests, and if you, for example, try anti-inflammatories for a while and see if there's improvement, it's not that hard to establish as inflammatory.
Yeah, you're clearly a professional at that, because my next question was going to ask you about that study. So thank you for talking about that. And I suppose it's definitely like from your, thanks for sharing all you have about as a patient, from your professional position as well. Like, where do you see do you see hope on the horizon? We've talked about patient involvement and the importance of lived experience already, but in terms of like from a research point of view, or the direction of travel from the various hats that you wear, I'm just thinking about the people that are watching this, that are maybe looking for hope or a little bit of change. Is there anything you see coming on the horizon that sort of offers that?
Yes, I mean, this study called Ideal Study, which really hope that it will make difference, because we will be trialing an ideal pathway to speed up the diagnosis in axSpA compared to the usual care. There are lots of other studies going both qualitative and quantitative to actually improve diagnosis. But I am also interested in looking at from neurodiversity point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Because I haven't got my diagnosis of autism until really later, until I was 45, and since then I sort of started to look at things very differently, because there are a lot of studies coming up, people, especially young people, autism, how they perceive also, for example, pain and things could be different, and how they interpret, and how we are seen at clinics. So, for example, autistic people tend to be more matter of fact, and how we express our feelings is not as perhaps not similar to neurotypical people. So then you could be underestimated in terms of how much pain you're experiencing and things like that. And there's also for example, gender dysphoria is quite common in young autistic people, or people with ADHD. And things like eating disorders, and then these are all kind of linked to chronic pain because of childhood trauma, not getting diagnosis. So I'm just looking at not just also diagnosis for men and women, but people with all these different characteristics, and looking at their own experiences and how it is actually, how we can actually change health services to be a bit more aware, and look at people more as individuals, and not dismiss them. Because I think young people get dismissed in consultations a lot as well.
Yeah, and I think as well, people forget that those experiences shape a patient's journey with their condition. As somebody that had my disease from a very young age and spent a lot of years basically being talked over my head to my parents and everything, suddenly I become an adult and I have to sort of talk about my condition, and it shapes it shapes what's important, what you perceive, whether it's pain is important or that symptom is important. So it's a really important topic. So thank you for sharing that. And I suppose I should do a little plug here to say, for regular viewers of the show, in 2 weeks' time, we've got Martin Stevens joining us from the University of Aberdeen to talk about the QUICK and the iPrepare studies as well. So if anyone's watching this is interested in that side of what we try to sort of showcase here on the Chronic Pain Club, then there'll be more research and study talk coming in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to his talk. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm very grateful, and I think as well it's really important to say, like, people like yourselves coming on here and talking about that side. It's something we've worked really hard to try and get all voices from all sides of the table. So, and like someone like yourself was just a perfect guest with a foot in both camps. But for a lot of years it was patients talking to patients, and now we're in this position where we can hear about what's happening on both sides, and therefore we can come together to try and understand and appreciate that we all want the same things and we're all got the same pressures. And so I'm really, really grateful for you joining us. I'm also very conscious that it's Mother's Day and we're approaching 8 o'clock, and and you've shared a lot. I just wanted to sort of give you the opportunity, if there was anything else you wanted to say or anything else you wanted to tell people where they could find you or get involved with particular work or studies or anything like that, then yeah, floor's yours for as long as you want it to get those messages across.
Oh gosh, I think I could be here all day and talk about, because I feel amongst friends I feel very passionate about this subject, and that's why I love my job, because it doesn't feel like work. I wanted to just talk about a little bit. I'm also interested in work because I think chronic pain and chronic pain conditions affects our work lives a lot. Because especially if you have a job that you have to be there, 9 to 5 or work certain things, work patterns, and you have to travel, you have to be there. I think I've been really lucky to work to have a flexible job where I can work from home. And I've been doing work rehabilitation research for many years, and I know the people who can work flexibly, or just some people have to go self-employed, can be employed for a long time, or self-employed can work for a longer time. And we know that working is associated with better health outcomes. So we've just launched a website called workwelluk.org. So if you have any time, have a visit and looked if you have especially it is for people with inflammatory arthritis, but I'm sure it will be just as helpful for people with chronic pain or any other long-term condition. So check it out.
Brilliant, thank you. And I will try to include that. You'll probably find someone will put it in chat after you've gone, for other people to find a quick way of finding it, but we'll also put that into the podcast and video description as well for anyone that's watching or listening to this back. Where can people find you? Like you're an absolute force on Twitter, and one of the main reasons I keep coming back to Twitter is to check in what you're working on, because I fell out of love with it a little bit recently. But where can people find you on there, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I think we're all there, isn't it? I've contemplated of leaving, but I'm not on Facebook, so that's the only platform I use. And there's such a
trust me, you're
crowd
not missing anything. Facebook's gone safe. You're not missing anything.
I'm on there. My name is at Prof Yeliz Prior. You can find me on there. Yes, I put everything in on, and I'm also on LinkedIn. I do share a lot of things on X, isn't it? It's called not Twitter. I keep calling it Twitter as well, on the X platform, and I talk to like-minded people. I am not as active as I used to be either. I think because it's a change as a platform, but it still doesn't have an alternative, I find.
No, for me, it is the only place where I can speak directly to the likes of you and professionals, and if I'm going to a conference, where I can make sure that my time there is meaningful by sort of doing that, having them conversations in advance. I've not been able to find a replacement, hence I've come back with my tail between my legs. but yeah,
just have to use what we can, don't we? Yeah, absolutely. But also, if you type my name online, you'll find with my work email and everything, because I have an unusual name, Turkish/English. It comes up with lots of information about me, so I'm very easy to find and contact you.
Yeah, this was probably the easiest research I had before a guest came onto the show. So it was more picking what bit we talked about. But thank you so much for giving up your Sunday evening. Thank you as well, I should say, for being such a friend and supporter of what we do, and such a supporter of me personally as well. I genuinely value that. I probably don't say it enough. This hasn't been the easiest journey stepping into this world, and I didn't exactly do it intentionally. It was very much reluctantly, and it was just the timing with the pandemic and everything, and in this space there's been a couple of shining lights who have really showed me the way and been an inspiration and encouraged me to do more, and you're certainly one of that very small minority. So keep doing what you're doing, and thank you for being so brilliant and just filling my cup up to keep doing stuff that we're doing over here, like you do, and for joining us again. Thank you.
Thank you. You fill my cup up as well. I think we all kind of serving each other, don't we, with our cups? You're right. We don't say these things enough, and we need to acknowledge it. And it's nice to be there as a community, to be there for each other. And I've really enjoyed this hour. So thank you for having me.
And please do come back, because read and chat as you've been talking, they've absolutely loved it. And I can also tell you guys, this is the most viewers we've ever had live on LinkedIn and Twitter. So hello to everybody watching us there. Please do give us a follow, or whatever the equivalent is on your platform, if you've enjoyed this, to see what we do every week. Thank you for that, and hopefully we've started conversations, which is what we aim to do, and try and bring patients, professionals, and all parties involved in trying to achieve better patient outcomes together. And thank you for being a huge part, Yeliz, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you. I'd love to come back.
All right, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you again. Bye-bye.